All right, I'm here with Caitlin and Liz and Alan to offer you exciting NFT bargains. But first, we got Caitlin with misinformation.
Right. I always have misinformation for everybody. So somebody named PTI, which is a uh, great name of a journalist, uh, t on the oneindia.com website is talking about how YouTube scientists, I have no idea what a YouTube scientist is, but they are trying to pre-bunk millions of users against misinformation. So most of the research done in misinformation is how to utilize it to best serve your needs, be it through advertisements or through political campaigns. There hasn't been a ton of research in how to fight against misinformation. And it turns out that one of the best ways to fight against misinformation is to stem it off before it happens. So you essentially inoculate users against misinformation by priming them ahead of time against it. So if you, for example, let's say there is a piece of misinformation going around the internet like the earth is flat. We've all heard that one. What you can do is instead of waiting for people to become conspiracy theorists and fall for the scam or fall for the misinformation, what you do is you prime people ahead of time by telling them before they even hear about flat earth that the idea is silly and dumb and you shouldn't listen to these people. And by essentially inoculating people against this misinformation, psychologically people then become primed to reject it when they first hear it. And that's how you get it. So there's basically like first, like the way the human brain works is it's almost like first come, first serve. And if the conspiracy theorists or misinformation get in there first, it's really hard to change someone's mind. So the way that you make sure that misinformation does not spread is you become first. You get in there, you tell people the truth, you get people to not fall for the stuff before they even have an opportunity to.
Yeah, I remember this worked really well when they told us all that the Russians were feeding misinformation to the us about Hunter Biden's laptop and it was all fake. That really worked.
Oh, well,
It
yes,
totally, yeah,
I mean, but yeah, I mean, of course, Hunter's laptop was a real thing.
but it totally worked. They fooled the whole
Yeah,
nation for about a year.
yeah, but like I said, you can that that's what you want to do. And like I said, most of the time, this research is done into how to manipulate the public into, like I said, buying things or voting a certain way. But
But
you know, you
on
yeah.
it as a scientific matter, I think they haven't really answered the question. I mean, the point is some information has to come in that appears authoritative that you accept. And then, of course, when contradictory information comes in, you reject it. But they haven't really explained why it is that to some people, the certain information is considered authoritative and to other people, the other information is considered authoritative.
That that is a more of a philosophical question.
No,
So
I think it's an issue of what you think of as sufficient authority and who you trust, things like that.
that's what I'm saying. This is a philosophical question. What is
Oh,
authority? How do we decide what is authority? You
yeah.
know, but if we're looking at what tends to sway people's minds more, that's more of a scientific question.
Well, I think they're both reasonable questions to investigate.
Oh, they're both reasonable questions, but they're just different fields.
Oh, I suppose it could be. None of it's my field. All right. Anyway, so Liz has a synthetic embryo.
Yeah, so this was a pretty cool story about that came out within the past few days. Some researchers at the University of Cambridge managed to do something really cool with their research. They were able to create an actual embryo with a brain and a heart that beats using stem cells. And they used, before we get further into the story, they used mouse stem cells to do this in the lab. But they've
But
been
they
trying,
want to do it with humans next, right?
they do want to do it with humans, and they've been trying to achieve this result for years. and finally managed to get there. It's pretty fascinating that they managed to do this using stem cells. And typically, these type of experiences do translate pretty well. So I imagine they will be able to do this with humans.
But how can they possibly do this in America? This has got to be illegal.
One would think, but who knows? Who knows?
They're not doing it in America now, right? It's
I really don't know what the current state of stem cell research legislation is. I do know that it has in the past, the government's been kind of hostile towards it, and it has prevented a lot of medical advancement in terms of, like helping stroke victims recover.
Well, yeah, but what I mean is right now we're about 1 inch from declaring the fertilized egg a full American citizen with full human rights. So
Right.
we can't be growing embryos for experimental purposes.
Well, we already kind of do in terms of in vitro fertilization, and that's actually been an issue with the ongoing debates about abortion law, because typically more embryos than are necessary are created, and there's a culling process for that.
Yeah.
And some states, there may be some legal questions about in vitro fertilization now. So that's, one of the many sort of unintended consequences, I think, of this legislation. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds here. But, as I'd mentioned, this research was taking place at University of Cambridge, which is in the UK. So
Yeah.
they
do want to grow like organs in these things, right? For replacement organs and stuff. That would be awesome.
Yes. That is one of the eventual goals, and what some of the research has been centered on. So
as long as you don't have any of those irritating ethics problems, it would be great.
I think that's always gonna be a problem, but it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds in the coming years.
Yeah, yep. Just like you have to leave your state for an abortion, you might have to go to like the UK to get a replacement brain or something.
And, one of the other things that we think about too, that comes into play too, is that, organ trafficking is still a problem. So
yeah,
pretty big ethics concerns there. If we can find a way to cut the legs out from underneath that market, I think it would be of great benefit to humanity.
Yeah. All right. And Alan's blaming Russia for something.
Yes, along with the government of Montenegro, which has come under serious attack on Friday and Saturday. A number of government agencies their websites were taken down, and worse yet, a number of utilities were affected, including the water and electricity grid. So it seems like this was a very serious situation. They were able to restore services to people by basically switching off the computers and controlling everything manually. But some of the government websites remain down, and the Montenegro government is now blaming various Russian government agencies. They've specifically called out Russian government agencies.
Has that happened before? I know we've been talking about our infrastructure being susceptible to being hacked, but I thought it was only theoretical.
Well, no, we've already heard about other governments getting hacked by Russian patriotic hackers.
But I mean the infrastructure, like the water and the electricity, I haven't really heard of that actually being shut down by a cyber attack before.
Oh yeah, right. This is the largest scale attack we've seen yet.
Yeah.
And it's part of Russia's grander hybrid warfare scheme, in which they are trying to punish the smaller, more vulnerable members of NATO and countries in Europe that blame or rather oppose Russia's agenda, and particularly Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. And Montenegro, as a member of NATO and as a critic of the Russian government, definitely was vulnerable. So they got hit hard. This is probably the worst attack that we've seen yet from Russia against one of its much smaller neighbors.
Well, the technical details will be important because it's a really big issue in America, how we're going to protect our infrastructure.
Yeah, it's a huge one. And unfortunately, the Montenegrin government is not sharing any details. They also are not providing any evidence of how they concluded that this is an attack from Russia. But I mean, it wasn't. It couldn't possibly be anybody else. So
Yep.
it's a foregone conclusion that Russia's behind this. But Russia's hit Romania, they've hit Lithuania, Poland, Finland, Latvia. So it's it's part of a larger pattern. It's just that Montenegro is probably the most vulnerable of all those countries because it's a tiny country. There's a population of like 600,000 people, so it's smaller than San Francisco. And it's also geographically a small country, not the smallest, but yeah, it's a very small country, so I'm sure they don't have much in the way of resources for defending their cyber infrastructure.
Yeah, well, it's important, sort of like a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, and so there's an article on SciTech Daily where physicists have built a quantum heat pump, which is very cute. It's two interconnected superconducting circuits that are LC resonance circuits. And the end result of these two connected superconducting circuits is you have a radio detector that can achieve close to the quantum limit at detecting faint radio signals, which is very interesting and who have many applications, one of the many being searching for dark matter, but they've sort of made a ideal radio detector. And I think that'll turn out to have a lot of good applications. And then we're back to Caitlin, who's got, the canceled moon rocket.
Yep, Artemis 1, the launch on Monday morning got canceled. The BBC has an article written by Thorne Poole talking about the cancellation, which was due to essentially an engine failure having to do with the cooling of the engine. They couldn't get it to cool in time, so they scrubbed it, which is a good move. It's much better to scrub it and make sure the launch is perfect rather than to potentially blow up this rocket. However, I do want to point out also why this rocket is such a big deal. Since the Saturn V, no country, no one has made a rocket as powerful. However, the SLS rocket is going back to the moon, and it is an amazing rocket. It really is. It doesn't get enough credit. So it's about this. It's a little smaller than the Saturn V in terms of height. In terms of weight, it's about the same. However, it produces more thrust and it goes to a higher top speed. About a third so the top speed is 39,500 kilometers per hour for the SLS versus 28,000 kilometers per hour for the Saturn V. But of course, the cost to build is what's really amazing here is that the Saturn V would cost $51.8 billion in 2022 to make, whereas the SLS is about a little less than half that at 23 billion. So it's about half as cost of the build. And it would have cost, but the launch is slightly more expensive. So it costs 4.1 billion to launch versus 1.49 billion for the Saturn V. But it's our most powerful rocket ever, and it's going to the moon, and hopefully we'll see it in action as soon as they work out all the kinks.
I wanted to ask you about this. Why are we going back to the moon? I've heard NASA people say we're going to have a permanent base there and use it to go to Mars. But I thought sending humans to Mars was a total non-starter because people are going to get a lethal radiation dose on the way there.
Well, yes, I'm not entirely sure we're going to set up any permanent colonies on Mars. As far as I know, there's no plans for permanent colonies on the moon, and there's no plans for permanent colonies on Mars. That's not to say there's not future missions to Mars. There obviously are going to be many more missions to Mars and to the outer solar system. And one of the biggest problems of launching to, say, Mars or Venus or any other planet, or even, really anywhere, is not Earth's gravity. Earth's gravity is not that important. Gravity is pretty weak. It's the atmosphere. And if we could launch from a place without an atmosphere, that would be so much better. So if we could set up, for example, like moon mining, setting up certain, space-based resource harvesting and launching sites on the moon, that can greatly expand, our spacefaring capabilities. And that's not to say, like I said, I don't think there's no plans to like move to the moon or have colonies on Mars or anything like that. But there are strategic advantages to having a presence on the moon and having resource collection on the moon, for example.
So these will be automated bases with minimal human interaction.
Right. Like one of the things you could have, for example, is a mirror essentially on the moon. So what you do is you set up a giant rotating pool of liquid metal that'll naturally form into a parabola, and you can make it really large on the moon, and there's very little atmosphere to get in the way of the turbulent liquid. And then you could set up like a giant mirror with no atmosphere in the way, and get some really beautiful, images from that. So there's plenty of things that you could do around the moon. So,
all right, fair enough. And speaking of bargains, Liz has got a 30 terabyte portable drive for only $40. This is awesome.
Yeah, if you want to, you can go on down to Walmart and get that, but I wouldn't recommend it. There's a good article written by Andrew Cunningham for Ars Technica, based on a interesting tweet thread from Ray Redacted, who is a good individual to follow on Twitter if you like interesting security stuff. And this concerns this bargain 30 terabyte drive that he bought off the Walmart website that is actually he got it off of AliExpress, but there's a lot of pass-through sales going on through the Walmart website, and it's at about an $8 markup on the Walmart website, so you can pay more for less. Because surprise, surprise, this $40 drive didn't actually turn out to contain 30 terabytes. This is sort of a well-known scam that's been happening for eons, where you'll buy some storage, and this looked pretty good. The housing looked sort of like the Samsung like T5s and T7 portable SSD drives. I've got a few of those. They're actually, the Samsung ones are pretty great products. They take a lot of abuse and work well over the years, and in my experience have contained the reported amount of storage. However, these contained two 512 megabyte flash drives that were hot glued into a case that looked like the real Samsung one. So it was kind of cool. He did a breakdown on how exactly it worked, and I hadn't seen so much of an in-depth breakdown, which was interesting. But the way that this works is that the scammers will use firmware that misreports the size of the actual storage. And then this firmware will just keep rewriting data on top of old data, so that it seems like you're writing these enormous files to it, but then when you actually go to access them, they're not there. They don't exist. So buyer beware when you find some cheap solid state storage. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
I mean, the thing about this is that this is the exact same thing companies have been doing for decades. It's just very obvious that it's wrong. So we used to call this planned obsolescence. The idea that technology was designed specifically to get people hooked and buy it right away, but then just not really live up to its standards, fail after a certain amount of time, and you have to go out and either buy a new one or throw it away or something. And it's the same idea. Where
not really. This is more of a bait and switch. Planned obsolescence means you're going to buy an iPhone and maybe the hardware still works, but they're deliberately discontinuing software support to compel you to buy another one. It's engineered in for it to fail and you have to buy new ones, but this is This is a complete lie where they're telling you you're getting 30 terabytes worth of data, but you're really barely getting a gigabyte.
Right. Well, I mean, I suppose you're right. I mean, they are outright lying about what you're getting in terms of specs. But I've seen this all over the place on Amazon. Every non-name brand thing just basically lies about their specs completely. You go to buy batteries, batteries have like double the amount of amp hours that they actually have, et cetera, et cetera. And then you also have things like, and I do think planned obsolescence is really in the same category, because you are designing the product to fail, essentially. And that's what's going on here. Like, it will work. If you get these 30 terabyte drives, they'll work for, if you want to write a Word document or two, they'll work just fine. Just they're designed to fail once you hit like 512 gigabytes or something, or 512 megabytes, who knows? But this is just a common practice, unfortunately, and there's very little people can do about it, because
The batteries are a great example. I've seen that too, time and again, where they lie about the battery capacity in the banks. We were just talking about this recently at DEF CON. The banks are a great example, because they'll sell you this bank saying, oh, you're getting a big battery in it with all of these mega amp hours. But as you mentioned, really what it is going to be is a series of smaller batteries bundled together.
That are nowhere near the advertised
Right.
amount. Yeah. I mean, just manufacturers flat out lie on their products.
Well, if you can't trust the hardware, and you can't trust Amazon, and you can't trust Walmart, the only thing you can do is put your money in NFTs, which Alan has a great bargain for you.
Well, I will say that Amazon and Walmart are, at least in part, not guilty in this. These are people abusing their system, putting up products with fake specs.
Yeah. You really
etc.
have to be careful though. Like, I got scammed from the Amazon marketplace once and bought a international step down converter power strip that totally lied about the specs and basically caught on fire when you plugged it in. So
that's a little harsh.
Yeah. It had an Underwriters Laboratory sticker on it, but I don't think it was legit.
Well, Alan, I think we're losing faith in humanity here, and we count on you to bring it back.
Oh, yes, that's right. Because I have an opportunity for everyone, an opportunity to get fabulously wealthy. And of course, I'm talking about the great NFT run-up right now. Yes, NFTs, they're making a comeback. OpenSea, the world's largest NFT marketplace / trading platform / hustle website, is apparently showing a 99% decrease in the amount of trading volume. 99%. And this after their peak in May 1st, they had $2.7 billion in NFT transactions, but as of Sunday, they had only $9.34 million.
So does that mean everybody's satisfied with their purchases? Is that what that means?
I think so. People got their Bored Apes, they got their cyberpunks, or excuse me, their CryptoPunks, and they love their pixelated, low quality, algorithmically generated, not very artistic art. And now they're using that on their Twitter profiles, and that's it. Their work is done. And
that
so
means if you want to buy NFTs, they're probably cheaper now.
Well, they haven't fallen quite enough. The Bored Ape Yacht Club Bored Apes have gone down about 53%. So they're still trading at six figures, $110,000 still for a Bored Ape. And then the CryptoPunks have only declined about 19%.
Oh.
So yeah, it's a great buying opportunity. You look at the various platform message boards, or what do they call it, forums, Reddits, and people are still talking about, well, if you can play the long game, there are tremendous opportunities out there still.
That's
So,
assuming it will never come back up, and it's not clear why it would.
well, why would it come back? I mean,
Yeah.
Bored Ape, I wouldn't call that art, and CryptoPunks I definitely would not call art. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Why do you want these things? I wouldn't even bother to right click on these images to download the image onto my computer, let alone pay $110,000.
You know, this is what the older generation said about jazz and the Beatles and rap and everything. Maybe you're just an old fuddy-duddy.
Yeah, well, it's a pyramid scheme, whereas jazz and Beatles and rap are not.
Well, it does seem to be that way.
Yeah.
I will say that the NFTs are the work of the devil, and they're corrupting our children.
I don't know if our children even know or care about them. I think it's corrupting boomers trying to get rich. Anyway, so the U.S. healthcare is getting hacked an awful lot. There's an article on Politico about it. And apparently, the theft of medical information, like many other kinds of cybercrime, is really big and on the rise. And there is a Department of Health and Human Services office that is supposed to investigate breaches and help healthcare agencies improve their defenses, but they're totally underfunded and understaffed, so they can't do either of those things very well. They're fish out of water. So
I read this article and I thought it was weird that it was like the Office of Civil Rights that's supposed to investigate the data compromises.
Well, I think they regard it as an invasion of your civil rights when somebody steals your medical records. I guess that's the connection. But yeah, anyway, as I think is pretty well known, the government is not able to do much to protect you in the cyber domain. And people who are going to them for help are probably not going to get it. Anyway.
Maybe we need to have some, like we have Hack the Pentagon, maybe we need to have some Hack HHS events.
Well, I don't think the issue is HHS protecting itself. The issue is being understaffed and underfunded. I don't think like a bug bounty would help them.
Yeah, I guess the Pentagon isn't too underfunded.
No, quite the opposite. All right. And so Caitlin's got a space ace.
Yeah, so the Smithsonian has this really wonderful article going back, talking about what happened in 1985, which is when an aircraft shot down a satellite in outer space for the first time. So like I said, this is from the Smithsonian. Author is Paul Glenshaw. This was actually originally written in 2018. And like I said, this talks about what happened in September 13th, 1985. So we're coming up on the anniversary here pretty soon. And so what happened is that Major Wilbert Doug was in an F-15A over the Pacific Ocean, and he was doing a very steep vertical climb. He at about 36,000 feet, he released a missile toward a target. It was the Solwind P-78-1 in orbit, low Earth orbit, going about 17,500 miles per hour, about 300 miles above. And of course, being 300 miles away, the rocket, essentially disappeared from view, and but essentially hit the satellite. And that was the first time a person in a craft, not on the ground, in a craft, hit a satellite and destroyed it, by the push of his cockpit button. But of course, anti-satellite stuff has been in the works going back since the time Sputnik first went up. When Sputnik went up, the Americans got all freaked out because the Russians had a thing over American airspace, potentially spying on us and stuff. And so since the beginning of the space race, since the beginning of space travel, we've also been looking at ways into blowing stuff up. And that's what's been going on ever since. So
yeah, that's the American way.
Oh yeah.
All right, Liz has got this school district getting hacked.
Yeah, this is a pretty wild story from last week about a school district in Pennsylvania that got hacked, and essentially this whole thing unfolded to $13 million getting stolen. There were a few different stories on this, but one I found from the local news area on ABC6 in I don't know, Chester Upland, somewhere near Chester, Pennsylvania, was the best one. That kind of explained how this all went down. It sounded like it started with a business email compromise, where the Nigerian attackers were able to infiltrate the school's email system and send emails that diverted payments to various accounts, and essentially then they used a money mule in Florida who was the victim of a romance scam and believed that she was helping somebody that she thought she was falling in love with, didn't know where the money was coming or where it was going. And it sounded like they managed to steal over 13 million or over $3 million. The last payment was 8.5 million, and that got flagged just because it was so huge. And they were able to get that money back for the school district. However, there's still more than $3 million outstanding. And I would suspect probably somewhere closer to 5, though that's not confirmed. And it was interesting because one of the comments from one of the school officials in this story was, if the Treasury had not stopped that last payment, the teachers might not have been paid their last paycheck, which is pretty amazing.
So they don't have any financial controls? Just one person can just spend that amount of money?
Well, apparently they, it wasn't, that was what surprised me, that amount was so high, the $8.5 million. And the only officials in this story that were quoted, local officials, were the state of Pennsylvania's treasurer, and then the county where the crime occurred, their district attorney. So I'd be interested to hear more about that. Also, it would be interesting to see who flagged the 8.5 million, because the story doesn't really say, other than, it has a quote from the state treasurer saying that we put a hold on it and went back in history and saw there was some sort of an account change. So maybe there is some monitoring at the state level, but it's pretty wild what's happening at the local level. And it makes you wonder how much money is just disappearing on the regular from school systems around the country, especially usually they go to the effort of at least creating some shell corps and having some no bid contracts so that they have some paper trail for where that money goes. But apparently in some spots, it's a real free for all.
So these guys are amateurs. They need to spend time in San Francisco and learn how to do it right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's where all CCSF's money is going, and why our courses are getting canceled, and why the teachers are getting paid less or fired.
I imagine. All right. And Alan's got Willie Brown's home.
I didn't know he lived there.
He does live there, and he keeps saying everything's fine, don't worry.
Well, it's just a metaphor for all of San Francisco, isn't it? And of course, we're talking about San Francisco's favorite leaning tower, the Millennium Tower, constructed during the height of the housing crash in 2008. It was a luxury apartment building.
The housing crash, you say. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, yes. Excuse me, not an apartment building, but a condo building. And it was supposed to be the most luxurious housing in San Francisco at the time. Of course, the problem with the Millennium Tower is that it's been tilting for years now. It's been settling because the developers decided to go cheap and did not sink the piles into the bedrock. So it's just on a pad, floating on a pad on top of sand, essentially. And Well, we all know how that works out because the San Francisco is built on landfill and sand and bay and fill and whatnot. The building is tilting. And so various engineering fixes have been proposed and attempted. The most recent one was to essentially construct a entirely new subsystem, if you will, underneath the building, drive 52 piles into the bedrock, hundreds of feet below the surface, and then expand the pad that the building floats on so that the pad is connected to these piles. But in so doing, the engineering firm pumped out too much sand. And so they only managed to accelerate the tilt of the building. And so now they've come up with a new plan, and they're just going to use the 18 piles that they've already successfully sunk, and they're still going to expand out the pad, and they're going to hope and pray that this fixes the problem, which seems a little bit unlikely because the tower is already tilting some 28 inches. And if it goes to 40 inches, then the systems in the building will apparently stop working. So this is better work, or else maybe they're going to have to pull the building down.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be quite a project. I'd be impressed to see that.
This is quite the ongoing saga. I mean, this has been happening for a number of years now. And how old is the building? What year was it built?
2008, 2009.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
All right. And the last one I got, I thought was pretty interesting. By using artificial intelligence, they can monitor your breathing while you're asleep, and they can detect incipient Parkinson's, which is really important because most people don't diagnose Parkinson's until they have serious symptoms, which is many years later. And there is no way to detect it in the early stages, apparently. So I'm hearing a whole lot of medical AI is really coming of age. They can look for subtle changes in your body and detect things early. So that might help. I know there are treatments for Parkinson's. They're not great, like brain implants and stuff, but I assume detecting it earlier would be better. And all right, I think that's it for this one. And we'll be back on Friday.